The study of consumption did not start with cultural studies. Fields like sociology, economics, and literature have been examining consumption for much longer. In the early stages of studying consumption, the focus was primarily on social deprivation. Scholars looked at which groups in society lacked the means to consume and the effects of poverty on their ability to participate in consumption. These studies often explored state policies aimed at reducing poverty and improving access to resources. During this phase, the primary concern was the absence of purchasing power among certain groups. This meant that the discourse revolved around what people could not consume due to economic challenges. Thinkers like Max Weber, Stein Veblen began exploring consumption from another angle. Veblen introduced the idea of conspicuous consumption, which refers to people buying goods not just for their practical use but to display wealth and status. This approach also highlighted wastefulness in consumption, especially among affluent groups. Consumption during this phase was tied to demonstrating prestige and class identity. While one side of the discussion focused on deprivation, the other examined the lavish habits of the wealthy and how these habits reinforced social hierarchies. Pierre Bourdieu refined the study of consumption, adding new concepts and methods. He introduced terms such as taste and distinction. Taste is not just about individual preferences but is a social resource that reflects and reinforces class identity. For example, people use their taste in food, clothing, furniture to establish and enhance their position in society. Similarly, distinction refers to how certain consumption practices and choices differentiate one social class from another. These ideas help to show how consumption is tied to social hierarchies and cultural values. Another important concept introduced during this is habitus. Habitus refers to the structures and patterns of behavior, preferences, and aspirations that individuals develop based on their social and economic background. It is shaped by a person's family, community, and everyday experiences of class. Habitus determines how individuals think about and engage in consumption. For instance, people from different social classes may have distinct tastes and habits which are shaped by the economic limitations and cultural expectations of them. This concept helps explain why certain groups consume in specific ways and how these patterns are maintained across generations. Manuel Castells focused on collective consumption and how it connects to larger systems of economics, and society. Castells examined the role of the state and corporations in shaping consumption patterns, as well as how these patterns contribute to social and material reproduction. His work highlighted the interconnections in political power, economic systems, and everyday consumption practices. Today, scholars explore the emotional experience of shopping or the role of advertisements in shaping how people view certain products. There is also a focus on the semiotics of consumption, which examines how goods and brands are represented as symbols. These representations, often seen in media and advertisements, carry deeper meanings about social values, identities, and power dynamics. Modern studies of consumption also look at the meanings attached to goods. While utility is still important, scholars now pay attention to how products are presented aesthetically and symbolically. A commodity is not just something we use, it also has a cultural and social significance. For example, a designer handbag might serve as a functional item, but it also represents status and taste. This broader approach to consumption allows us to see it as more than just economic activity. It is deeply tied to culture, identity, and social. Consumption is not a simple act of acquiring goods for their utility or convenience. From a cultural studies perspective, consumption is deeply tied to emotions, meanings, and shared cultural values. It is an activity that goes beyond satisfying basic needs as it involves emotional investments and the creation of identities. Advertisers and producers understand this dynamic and often capitalize on consumers' emotions to influence their purchasing decisions. In this framework, consumption is culturally meaningful. It is not just an individual act, but one embedded in shared cultural practices. The choices people make, whether it is deciding to buy an appliance or eating out, reflect more than personal preferences. These acts carry cultural meanings shaped by values, rituals, and within specific societies. Through consumption, cultures are produced, reproduced, and even complicated as they intersect the social relations. Cultural studies show that consumption practices are not merely functional. For instance, eating out is not just about convenience, but a cultural activity rich with meaning. Preparing to buy a product, choosing a specific brand, or even deciding to dine at a particular place involves emotional engagement and symbolic significance. These actions contribute to identity formation and social differentiation, making consumption a key area of study in cultural discourse. Baudrillard offers an intriguing perspective on consumption, asserting that we consume, therefore we are. This statement plays on Descartes' famous declaration, I think, therefore I am, to highlight the centrality of consumption in contemporary life. For Baudrillard, consumption is tied to prestige, power, and identity. It is not just about meeting material needs, but about establishing a sense of self and differentiating oneself from others. Objects of consumption act as signs, and the act of consuming is a practice of creating meaning and asserting individuality. Baudrillard also emphasizes that consumption operates within a system of signs, where the value of an object lies not only in its functionality but also in what it signifies. For example, choosing one product over another often reflects a desire to stand out or belong to a particular group. This symbolic aspect of consumption underscores its role in shaping identity and social status. We are driven to continue consuming because it provides more than material satisfaction. It finds our sense of self and place in society. Roland Barthes views objects as part of semiotic systems. He suggests that even the functionality of objects is tied to cultural meanings and signifying practices. For Barthes, consumption is never just about fulfilling needs, it is always embedded in systems of representation and meaning. Objects do not exist in a vacuum but come with attached cultural values and interpretations. Cultural studies challenge the naturalization of consumption, which assumes that objects have inherent meanings or that needs are purely material. This perspective highlights how meanings are constructed and attached to objects through cultural practices. By studying consumption this way, cultural studies reveal how identity, representation, and social differentiation are central to consumer culture.